Hi, I'm Greta. I got a call at 1:07 a.m., the kind that doesn't just wake you, it empties something out of you. My mother was found curled outside a gas station in a blizzard. No coat, no shoes, just bruises. And the people who left her there? My brother and his wife. But that wasn't the worst part. What shattered me was realizing it wasn't the first time they'd hurt her. It was just the first time she couldn't lie for them anymore. So I drove 200 miles through snow and silence, straight into a truth I wasn't ready for. What do you do when the people who raised you are the ones you have to protect each other from? The snow had been falling for hours, soft at first, then heavy and determined. I could hear it pushing against the window pane like a restless animal. My apartment in Minneapolis felt unusually still. I had a chamomile tea cooling next to my laptop, a muted true crime rerun playing in the background, and folders of legal drafts splayed across the kitchen table. Typical Tuesday night. I was halfway through an email to a client when my phone lit up. 3 missed calls, all unknown numbers. At first, I thought maybe it was spam, or worse, someone from work needing last-minute forms. I was about to put the phone face down when it buzzed again, lighting up the darkened room like a flare. "Greta Vaughn?" a voice asked. Male. Calm. Official. "Yes. This is Officer Hanley with Rochester PD. Are you related to a Delora Vaughn?" My breath stopped. It wasn't the name, it was the way he said it. Carefully, like I might shatter if he got it wrong. "I'm her daughter." "There's a woman who matches her description," he said. "Found outside a Speedway gas station about an hour ago. She was in house slippers, no ID, no coat, disoriented. She's okay, just cold, but she wouldn't let us take her to the hospital. Said someone named Greta would know what to do." I blinked. Once, twice, trying to reconcile the image of my mother, Delora Vaughn, the woman who'd once told me I was a professional disappointment, with someone left shivering outside a gas station in a Minnesota blizzard. "I'm 200 miles away," I whispered, then louder. "Tell her I'm coming." It had been 7 years since I left Rochester. 7 years since I last stood in the same room as my mother. She hadn't called, written, or asked about me since I took a job in the city. She was the kind of mother who remembered birthdays when it gave her something to brag about, and forgot them when she was mad. But something about that call, it cracked something open. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't even change shoes. I grabbed my coat, keys, and the first aid kit under the sink, and I was out the door. The roads were already frosting over. I slid twice within the first 10 blocks and kept going anyway. My windshield wipers fought the snow, smearing more than they cleared. I kept my hands tight on the wheel, eyes locked on the beams of light cutting through the storm. The silence inside the car was deafening. No music, no radio, just my thoughts, rolling through like freight trains. The last time I saw Delora, we were in the middle of a fight in the kitchen. I'd gotten a full ride to a law program in another state. She said I was abandoning her. Said, "Don't come back here if you think you're better than this family." I didn't. But tonight, her voice echoed in my ears, panicked, unsure, stripped of all its sharpness. I imagined her, not as the woman who slapped a glass out of my hand at 17, but as someone's frightened mother in the middle of a snowstorm. Miles melted behind me, one treacherous stretch at a time. Gas stations were closed. Headlights were rare. I drove through towns I hadn't thought about in years, their outlines barely visible behind the flurries. I passed the welcome sign into Rochester sometime around 4:10 a.m. My knuckles were white from gripping the wheel. My breath fogged the windshield from the inside. I turned into the Speedway lot slowly, tires crunching over layers of compacted snow. And then I saw her. She was curled near the side of the building between a dumpster and a half-frozen soda machine. Her house slippers were soaked. Her fingers were bare. She had on what looked like an old robe layered over a stained nightgown. Her hair was disheveled, and her lips were cracked as if they hadn't tasted water in days. I stopped the car so hard I nearly slid into a snowbank. I left the door open behind me as I ran. "Mom," I said. I hadn't called her that in years. She didn't react at first. Her eyes were glassy, blinking slow. Then, finally, Recognition flickered across her face. "You shouldn't have come," she rasped. "I'm fine. Just slipped, that's all." My throat clenched. There was a bruise forming along her cheekbone, blooming like ink beneath pale skin. "Come on," I said, trying to lift her. "Let's get you warm." She winced when I touched her arm. Her body tensed like she was expecting a hit, not help. A police cruiser sat idling nearby. The same officer who'd called me stepped out and nodded at me quietly. "She wouldn't let us touch her," he said softly, holding out a fleece blanket. "Said someone would come." I wrapped it around her shoulders. She resisted for a second, out of pride or stubbornness, I couldn't tell, but then she leaned into me, just a little. I helped her into the car, cranked the heat, and turned the vents toward her face. For a while, we just sat there. The snow fell like confetti outside, blanketing everything in false serenity. She didn't speak. Neither did I. I handed her a bottle of water from the console, and she sipped at it like she hadn't tasted anything real in days. "She said some things," the officer said as he leaned in through the passenger window. "Not sure how much is accurate. Mentioned a son," said he. "Hit her. Threw her out. You might want to look into it." My stomach turned to ice. "Kellen?" I asked. The officer gave a slight nod, as if unsure he should say more. "She said she was confused, that she imagined the whole thing," he added, "but she also said she didn't want to die outside, that maybe someone would remember her." I looked over at my mother. She was staring straight ahead, lips trembling, eyes wet. I reached out slowly and took her hand. "I remember you," I whispered. I didn't respond right away. The officer's words hung in the air like a fog that refused to lift. Kellen said she was confused, that she imagined the whole thing. My eyes didn't leave his face. Snow swirled behind him, catching on the brim of his hat, melting into the collar of his coat. I could see the discomfort settle in his posture. Not from the cold, but from the truth he probably believed but couldn't say out loud. I nodded once, slow. "Thanks for letting me know." The ride to the motel was quiet. The roads were still slick, but the plows had started making their rounds. I knew the place I was headed, the only cheap spot still open in this part of town. The kind of place where the heat worked half the time, and the carpet smelled like someone tried to cover mold with pine-scented cleaner. I checked us in without speaking more than necessary, slid my license across the counter with a glance that said, "Don't ask." The clerk didn't. Delora shuffled behind me, wrapped in the blanket the officer had given her. She hadn't said a word since we left the gas station. When we got to the room, she moved straight to the edge of the bed and sat like someone waiting for permission to breathe. I brought her a styrofoam cup of hot soup from the vending area. She stared at it like I'd handed her a loaded gun. I didn't press. I knew that look, the same one I used to give the school nurse when she asked if someone at home hurt me. Back then, I'd say no. Smile too wide, pretend everything was fine. I'd become fluent in the language of pretending. She didn't touch the soup. Instead, she stared at the wall, then the lamp, then the floor, everywhere but me. I pulled the first aid kit from my coat pocket, crouched down beside her. Her fingers were chapped, split open near the knuckles. Her wrist was tender to the touch. "Looks sprained," I said, more to myself than to her. She flinched when I wrapped it. "I didn't fall," she said softly, eyes fixed on the wall. I didn't say anything. She glanced at me then, just for a second. "Why did you come?" I stood. "Because you didn't deserve to freeze in a parking lot, no matter what's happened." A long silence. Then, so faint I almost missed it, she muttered, "Don't let him take it all." I turned sharply. "What?" But her eyes were closed again, breath slow, as if she hadn't spoken at all. I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the second bed, staring at the cheap blinds swaying from the heater. Her phone buzzed once, an old flip model she'd had since I was in college. I checked it, 1 bar of battery left, 1 voicemail. I debated for a moment, then pressed play. It was Kellen. "You're embarrassing me, Ma. Keep this up and I'll make sure nobody finds you." My throat tightened. The voice wasn't angry, it was worse, calm, flat, like he was giving instructions to a plumber. I gripped the phone so hard it creaked in my hand. I'd spent years building a life where that voice couldn't reach me. And here it was, crawling through the air, cold and calculated. I remembered being 16, locked in the downstairs bathroom, holding a towel to my nose, blood soaking through. Delora on the other side of the door saying, "You always push him. He has more pressure than you. You should know better." She protected him, even from me. The ache wasn't just old, it was fossilized, and hearing it again didn't reopen the wound. It reminded me it never healed. I stepped outside the motel room, let the cold hit my skin like a slap. I didn't scream, I couldn't, but my body shook. Rage and clarity collided like oil and water. I had come here to help her. Now I knew I had to protect her from him. I got back inside. Delora was awake, eyes following me. I didn't wait. "Did he hit you?" She blinked. "He didn't mean to. I shouldn't have spoken out." "Spoken out about what?" She hesitated, her lips pressed together, forming a tight line. "The house," she said finally. "The accounts?" "I shouldn't have signed." I sank into the chair across from her. "What did you sign?" "Everything. I gave him access to the house, the bank. He said he'd manage it, help me with bills. Said I couldn't handle it anymore." "And you believed him?" "I was tired. Your father. When he passed, Kellen stepped up. I thought—" Her voice cracked. "I thought he'd take care of me." "And now you're sleeping next to a dumpster," I said, too sharply. She flinched. "Don't talk to me like that." "Then don't lie to me like I'm still 15. We didn't speak for a full minute. Then she whispered, "You always wanted to leave. I thought you were gone for good." "I was," I said, "until your name came up on a police report." I couldn't sit still anymore. I grabbed the keys, walked to the car, and sat inside. The steering wheel was cold. My breath fogged the window. I closed my eyes and let the memories come. Kellen holding a birthday party I wasn't invited to. Mom framing his high school award while mine collected dust in a drawer. The day I left for college, Delora didn't even walk me to the door. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the investment. All those years trying to prove I deserved a place in my own family. And now, it was collapsing. Because she finally saw what I always knew. I didn't come here for revenge. But I wasn't leaving without the truth. It was just past noon when I pulled into Kellen's driveway. The snow had let up, but the wind still had a bite to it, sharp enough to slice through my coat sleeves. I sat in the car longer than I needed to, staring at the house I used to call home. It hadn't changed. Same beige vinyl siding, same crack in the front step that Dad never fixed. From the outside, it looked sturdy, reliable, a place where everything made sense. But I knew better. Kellen had agreed, reluctantly, to let me come by to pick up some of Delora's things. I told him I'd be quick. He hadn't sounded happy, did he ever? But he didn't argue. Maybe he figured letting me walk around the place for 10 minutes was easier than drawing more attention to the mess he'd made. I knocked out of habit, then pushed the door open. It creaked just like it always did. The smell hit me first. Pine cleaner, mixed with whatever Riva had been cooking, some kind of sauce with way too much garlic. I stepped inside, wiping my boots on the mat that still read, "Home is where the heart is," even though we both knew that wasn't true. The hallway stretched out in front of me, and that's when I saw them. The photos. Dozens of frames lined the wall. Kellen as a toddler, grinning with cake smeared across his cheeks. Kellen in a football uniform. Kellen and Riva on their wedding day, all smiles and expensive hair. Their daughter Avery at every stage. Preschool graduation, ballet recital, first day of middle school. Even a framed print of Riva at her college graduation, wearing a sash like she'd discovered something no one else ever had. I walked slowly, scanning every single frame, every sliver of life captured and curated. And then I found it. Or rather, what was left of it. An old family photo, the one from 1999. I remembered that day. It was taken outside the church after Easter service. I was wearing a pale blue dress that Mom said made me look washed out. Everyone else was in pastels. We looked like one of those catalog families. But in this version, the photo had been neatly cropped. My side of the frame, my shoulder, my smile, the tilt of my head, gone, as if I'd never stood there. Delora once told me, that photo was too big for the wall. I used to think she meant it literally. Now I understood. I backed away slowly. My pulse ticked like a metronome in my ears. I tried to stay calm, to pretend this wasn't a slap in the face, but it was. Every frame was a reminder that I had been erased, one cropped memory at a time. Then came the voice I hadn't missed. "Didn't expect you to come back," Riva said from behind me. "We managed just fine." I turned to face her. She was wearing a silk robe and holding a coffee mug like she owned the world. Maybe she thought she did. "I'm not here to chat," I said. "Clearly," she replied, raising an eyebrow. "Your tone hasn't softened with time." "You kicked her out in a snowstorm," I said, keeping my voice level. "That's not something people forget." Riva rolled her eyes. "You really don't know half the story, Greta." "Then tell me," I said. "Tell me what she did to deserve the sidewalk." She sipped her coffee, letting the silence stretch. "She's been unstable for a while. Paranoid, confused, accusing Kellen of things you and I both know he'd never do." I stared at her, willing her to blink. "Like what?" "She claimed he stole from her," she said flatly. "Said he manipulated her into signing over the house. Can you believe that, after everything he's done for her?" "She signed over the house?" I asked, my stomach turning. "Oh, please," Riva scoffed. "It's not like she was using it properly. The place was falling apart and Kellen kept bailing her out. She doesn't even remember paying her utility bills." I took a step closer. "And so, you what? Decided to shove her out into a snowbank until she stopped being inconvenient?" She tilted her head. "You really think this is your moment, don't you? You swoop back into town and play the hero?" "But you weren't here. You don't get to judge what we've had to deal with." "You're right," I said. "I wasn't here. But I'm here now." She didn't reply, just turned and walked back into the kitchen like the conversation was over. Maybe it was for her. I turned away from the photo wall and made my way down the hall to the closet next to the stairs. I remembered Delora used to keep old photo albums in there, scrapbooks, boxes labeled by year, filled with ticket stubs and birthday cards and receipts from vacations we never went on again. The closet was a mess of plastic bins and Christmas decorations. I dug through them one by one, pulling lids, shifting boxes, and then I saw it, cardboard, dust-covered, with black marker scrawled across the top. 1999, Greta. I dragged it into the hallway and opened the flaps. Inside, my high school diploma, still in the original envelope. A birthday card with no signature, just the words, "Proud of you," in slanted handwriting. And a college acceptance letter, torn down the middle, then taped back together. I sat down on the floor, my legs folded under me, my hands trembled, but I didn't cry. I wasn't 16 anymore. I wasn't waiting for someone to tell me I mattered. I took out my phone and started taking pictures. Each item, one by one. Documentation, not nostalgia. This wasn't a trip down memory lane. This was evidence, not memories. Mrs. Lopez's words clung to me like damp air as I stood just inside the kitchen, staring at the tile floor. She said she saw blood, and the way she'd said it, measured, uneasy, like someone who had watched something wrong unfold and had never been able to name it, left me with a tightness in my chest I couldn't shake. The kitchen hadn't changed. Same pale yellow cabinets with chipping paint, same outdated light fixture that buzzed faintly when it warmed up. The only new addition was a row of expensive-looking spice jars lined up above the stove. Riva's touch, no doubt. Everything about this house still screamed familiarity, but none of it felt like home. I took a slow breath, then stepped out the back door, crossing the yard that separated our property from Mrs. Lopez's. Snow crunched under my boots, the path slick and uneven. It was late afternoon now, the kind of dull gray light that made everything feel like it was paused between day and night. I knocked twice on her screen door. It took a few seconds before I heard her slippers shuffle across the linoleum inside. When she opened the door, her eyes widened just slightly. "Greta Vaughn?" "Hi, Mrs. Lopez," I said. "Sorry to drop by unannounced." Her gaze softened. You've grown into your face, she murmured. You look like your daddy did. Serious, quiet. Come in. I've got hot water on. Inside, the house smelled like lemon balm and old paper. I took a seat at her small kitchen table while she poured 2 cups of tea, her hands trembling slightly as she set them down. I didn't waste time. You told me you saw my mother that night. Outside, bleeding. She nodded, lips pressed together. It was after 9. I'd just turned off the TV when I heard shouting next door. It wasn't the first time, but this time felt different. I went to the window, and that's when I saw her. I waited. She was stumbling, like her legs weren't steady, wearing that awful robe. And there was red on her hand, on her cheek. She looked scared. Did you see who was with her? She shook her head. No, but someone slammed the door behind her. Hard. I set my tea down. Did you report it? I should have, she said, voice dropping. But it's your brother, and your mother's always been proud. Didn't want anyone meddling. I nodded. Thank you for telling me. As I left, she called after me. Be careful, Greta. There's history in that house, and not all of it's old. Back across the yard, I stepped back into the kitchen and scanned the room again, more deliberately this time. A plate rack hung over the counter, a drawer stuck slightly open. Delora's words echoed in my head. The house? The accounts? Something happened here, not just physically, but something deeper, some shift in power, some confrontation that cracked through the surface of their so-called harmony. I opened the junk drawer and found a receipt shoved behind an old takeout menu. It was from a law office, dated 2 months ago. The notation? Property transfer, final signatures. Kellen had taken ownership of the house. Delora's name had been removed. Back outside, I circled the house to the side gate. As I moved to unlatch it, I heard footsteps behind me. You're digging, Reva said flatly. I turned to find her standing near the garage, arms crossed, dressed like she'd been waiting for this moment. That's what you do when someone's buried something, I replied. Her mouth twitched. You think you're clever. I think I'm done being silent. She stepped closer. You really believe you can unravel this? That anyone's going to take you seriously? You ran away from this family. I didn't run, I said calmly. I survived. She looked me over, eyes narrowing. You're not just meddling. You're trying to undo everything we built. No, I said. You built it on someone else's pain. That house was never yours. That name never meant only Kellen. She laughed then, short and sharp. Sweetheart, if you were smarter, you'd be married with power, not scavenging for relevance. I didn't flinch. Power doesn't erase proof, and I'm good at finding proof. She glared. You'll regret this. I already regret not coming back sooner. I left her standing there, wind tugging at her silk scarf, and returned to the motel. Delora was asleep, curled tightly on the far side of the bed. I sat down at the small desk, pulled out my laptop, and began organizing everything: receipts, the voicemail, notes from Mrs. Lopez, photos of the box labeled 1999, Greta. Each item went into a labeled folder. I composed a short email and sent it to Kellen's office address. Subject line: Delora has memory issues, but I don't. Body: let's meet. No signature. The next morning, Delora stirred as I poured her a cup of coffee. Her voice was scratchy. I heard your father once say, a drawer only breaks when it's opened too hard. I sat down beside her. What does that mean? Her eyes didn't meet mine. He pushed the drawer too hard. That night, I told him I was going to tell you everything. That scared him. My chest tightened. There was more? She nodded slowly. He said I'd ruin everything. That I'd make you turn on the family, that you'd use it against him. And were you going to tell me? She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Not of Kellen, but of me. I didn't want to lose both my children. I swallowed hard. You never had both, you just chose one. She didn't deny it. That night, after she fell asleep, I checked the living room again, eyes scanning for anything that might hold more truth. I found a small baby monitor tucked behind a decorative vase. I checked the back. It had a micro SD card. I took it. At a local drugstore, I bought a card reader and plugged it into my laptop. There were 10 files. The latest was timestamped the night she was thrown out. I clicked play. I didn't sleep that night. After I clicked play, time twisted into something unrecognizable, more weight than movement. My eyes stayed fixed on the screen, my breath held hostage somewhere between disbelief and disgust. The footage wasn't cinematic. No dramatic angles, no clear audio. It was grainy, the lens tilted slightly off-center, but I could see everything I needed to see. The timestamp in the bottom corner read 01:14, 8:14 p.m. Delora was standing near the kitchen counter. She looked small in that frame, like a guest in her own home. Kellen's voice filtered in first, louder than I remembered, barking about bills, about responsibilities, about her not being grateful. She said something about her account, about needing to check the withdrawals. Then, without warning, he moved toward her. The motion wasn't wild, it was practiced, a backhand across the cheek. She stumbled into the counter, her head hitting the edge with a sickening crack. Plates clattered off the drying rack. She collapsed to the tile floor. Seconds later, Riva entered the frame, holding her phone, glancing at Delora crumpled beneath her, and kept walking. I watched it again. Then again. By the third time, my hand was trembling so badly, I had to steady it on the edge of the table. This wasn't an argument. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was abuse, documented and time-stamped. And no one had lifted a finger. I uploaded the footage to a secure cloud folder and labeled it plainly. Mom, 01:14, evidence. No embellishments, no emotional titles, just fact, just the truth. Outside, the wind was still howling, the snow tapering off. Inside the motel room, I could hear Delora shifting in her sleep. I stared at the still frame, her body on the floor, one hand curled under her ribs, and I hated myself for not coming back sooner. Morning came gray and heavy. I waited until she stirred before I slid the laptop toward her, pausing the video just before the moment of impact. She blinked at the screen. "What's that?" she asked. "Something you need to see." She leaned forward slowly. When she recognized the footage, she flinched, as though her body remembered before her mind could catch up. "I don't," she whispered. "Don't say you don't remember. I know you do." Her lips moved, but no sound came out. "You told me he didn't mean it," I said. "You tried to make excuses. But this is what happened. And she walked right past you like you were an empty coat on the floor." Delora's voice finally found shape. "He's not a bad person. He's just overwhelmed." I pushed my chair back. "You've said that line for 20 years. When he broke my nose in 7th grade, you said it then too. When he locked me out in the yard all night while you slept, barefoot in winter, you told me I must have provoked him." She looked away. "Tell me something," I said, voice low. "Did you ever believe me? Even once?" Delora's jaw tightened. "You were always so loud, Greta. So needy." I laughed, bitter and small. Maybe I was just there, and that was too much. I didn't wait for a response. Back at the table, I drafted an email. No subject line. Just a still image from the footage. Delora mid-fall, the tile floor just inches from her head. I sent it to Kellen's work address. No message, no explanation, just the truth. It took less than 30 minutes for Riva to call. "What are you trying to do?" she hissed into the phone. "You want to ruin everything?" "You think a grainy video's going to change anything?" I let the silence stretch. Then, evenly, "I haven't even started." Click. I leaned back in the chair, listening to the radiator hiss against the cold. It wasn't about revenge, not anymore. This wasn't about making them suffer. It was about cutting off their access to her, to what they'd taken, to what they still believed belonged to them. I opened a legal template and started typing. Elder abuse, financial coercion, physical assault, names, dates, locations, attached evidence files. I had everything I needed. Then I picked up my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't used in years. Casey Hill, a nurse I used to work with who now did social work with the county. When she answered, her voice cracked with familiarity. Greta? Is everything okay? No, I said, but I think I finally know what to do. We talked for 20 minutes. I told her everything, not just the incident, but the pattern, the years of silence. The manufactured innocence, the property transfer, the medical records, the phone footage. She didn't interrupt once. At the end, she said quietly, I can file for an emergency evaluation. That'll trigger a home visit. If it holds up, it goes to court. Do it, I said. Today. I'll need a statement. I'll send it within the hour. By evening, I'd done more paperwork than I had in the last 2 months combined. My hands were stiff, but my mind was clear. Delora stayed quiet most of the day, her eyes on the window like she was watching a storm roll in. I sat across from her, folders stacked high between us. You're doing all this for someone who never believed you, she said. No, I replied. I'm doing it for someone who deserves to finally believe herself. We didn't talk after that. I turned in just after midnight. The room was dark, the heater humming a dull rhythm. Sometime before dawn, I woke to the sound of the front desk phone ringing down the hall. I didn't move. I just lay there, eyes wide open, thinking about the courtroom, because I knew it was coming, and this time, I wouldn't be walking in as the forgotten daughter. The moment we stepped through the courthouse doors, everything slowed down. Cameras didn't flash. They blinked, subtle and constant, like eyes waiting to catch someone off guard. Reporters whispered into tiny microphones, their eyes scanning me, then shifting toward Delora, who walked beside me with slow, measured steps. She was dressed in one of my old jackets, something simple but warm, and it swallowed her small frame. Her silence was loud, but her posture, upright, composed, spoke volumes. We passed the metal detectors, the hallway echoing with the quiet buzz of anticipation. A woman from the clerk's office led us into the courtroom, where the judge was already seated. I could feel Kellen's eyes on me before I saw him. He was dressed to impress, of course. Dark suit, crisp collar, silver tie pin. A picture of restraint and professionalism, like he was the one filing the petition instead of defending against it. Riva sat beside him in a tailored coat, phone clutched in her manicured hand. Their expressions were controlled, but tight. This wasn't a meeting. This was war. I stood as the judge began the roll call and introduced the nature of the emergency hearing. My hands rested on the folder I'd brought, documents, emails, timestamps, and the video. My voice didn't shake when I presented the petition for legal guardianship, nor when I followed with a formal request for a restraining order against both Kellen and Riva. I submitted the transcript from the footage. I offered the full recording as evidence. The judge nodded occasionally, flipping through the papers without comment. Her face gave away nothing. Then it was their turn. Kellen stood slowly, brushing imaginary dust off his sleeve. Your Honor, he began, voice smooth and confident, we're deeply concerned about my mother's well-being. But these accusations, they're the product of long-standing tension within the family. My sister has been distant for years. She struggles with emotional regulation. This entire case is the result of resentment. Fabrications from a bitter sibling, Riva chimed in, her voice syrupy. Greta's always had issues with attention. We've tried to support Delora, but she's been confused, forgetful. We had to make difficult choices. I didn't react. I just looked at the judge. She didn't look back. Then, quietly, she turned to Delora. Mrs. Vaughn, the judge said, do you wish to speak? Delora sat for a long time without answering. A beat. Then another. The room grew still. Even the reporters leaned forward, breathless. Finally, she stood. Her voice wasn't strong. It didn't echo, but it cut through the room like glass. I used to think pain meant love, she said. That if someone yelled at you, it meant they were still paying attention. That if they hit you, they cared enough to stay. I don't believe that anymore. No one moved, not even Kellen. She looked at him, just looked, and then sat back down. That was all. The judge cleared her throat and turned to me. We'll reconvene in 72 hours for formal deliberation, but for now, Ms. Vaughn will retain temporary guardianship. The restraining orders are granted. Outside the courthouse, the air was crisp. Winter sun low behind the trees. Before I could step onto the sidewalk, Riva was on me. "You just humiliated your family," she hissed. "That video? You edited it." I didn't raise my voice. "It's authenticated. I have copies and witnesses now." She laughed once, bitter and short. "You don't get to play saint. You abandoned her for years." "I left to survive," I said. "You stayed to control." She glared at me, but there was something new in her eyes, uncertainty. That night, my laptop froze mid-save. At first, I thought it was a system glitch, but then a pop-up window opened. "File path not found," followed by another, and another. Everything gone. I checked my backup drive. Corrupted. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my phone, logged into my cloud drive. That was still intact. Thank God. By morning, the smear campaign had started. Anonymous posts on local forums, accusations of elder exploitation, fabricated screenshots showing me transferring money from Dolores accounts, photos of me with clients, twisted into false narratives. But I'd expected this. I contacted a journalist I trusted, Maya Walsh, a reporter who had written about elder abuse cases before. We'd met at a health policy conference 3 years ago. I sent her a message. "You want a story? Here's what successful sons get away with." I uploaded a partial clip of Dolores' courtroom statement to an advocacy site with national reach. I didn't label it with names. I didn't even explain. The words spoke for themselves. Within hours, comments poured in. "She sounds like my mom. I lived this. I thought I was the only one." The message was clear. We weren't alone. The silence that had protected them for decades was cracking. The next day, as I sipped lukewarm coffee from the motel vending machine, I watched the notifications build. Then, my phone buzzed with a new headline: Kellen Vaughn to address abuse allegations in press conference, today at noon. I smiled, calm and ready, because I knew what was coming. I stood on the courthouse steps, phone in hand, coat zipped all the way up to my throat. The wind was relentless, tugging at my sleeves and biting my skin, but I barely felt it. My eyes stayed locked on the screen. Kellen's press conference had just begun. He looked every bit the part, calm, calculated, dressed in navy with a pocket square that probably cost more than my rent. Riva stood slightly behind him, her lips painted a soft, non-threatening pink, her posture just angled enough to look supportive but not assertive. To anyone else, it might have seemed like a united front. To me, it was choreography. He started with a prepared statement, of course. "We're heartbroken by the false accusations that have surfaced," he said, hands folded neatly on the podium. "Our family has always prioritized compassion and care for our mother." Compassion. That word nearly made me laugh. He continued, painting a picture of family turmoil, generational misunderstanding, and mental decline. "Greta," he said, using my name like he'd earned the right, "has been estranged from our family for years. She's hurt, and sometimes hurt people lash out." It was textbook damage control. Make me look unstable. Position himself as the patient, burdened son. Let the audience fill in the rest. Reporters nodded. Some scribbled notes. A few looked skeptical, but no one interrupted. Not yet. I refreshed the live stream chat. The numbers were climbing. Viewers, comments, reactions. And then it happened. The screen glitched, just slightly. A notification banner slid across the bottom of the video. New video uploaded. Anonymous. It wasn't from me. The press conference didn't stop, but the energy shifted. A few reporters glanced at their phones. One woman, front row, paled visibly and raised her hand. "Mr. Vaughn," she said, "can you explain this audio recording that just surfaced?" Kellen blinked. "I'm sorry, what audio?" The reporter didn't wait. She pressed play on her phone, holding it up near her mic. His voice filled the space. "That old woman's a liability. Freeze her out if you have to." Gasps. Real ones. He froze, just for a beat, then leaned toward the podium. "That's clearly taken out of context. Another reporter cut in. Mr. Vaughn, is this your voice? He hesitated. That was all it took. Riva took a half step back, her face blanking out in real time. And just like that, the carefully composed illusion cracked. The clip spread fast. Reddit, Twitter, Facebook. Within minutes, the hashtag freeze her out trended nationwide. I didn't need to say a word. The truth had legs. Reporters shouted. Cameras pushed forward. Kellen tried to regain control, redirect, appeal to emotion, blame deepfakes, but it was too late. The phrase was out there, echoing louder than anything he could spin. Riva looked ready to bolt. She leaned in close to him, unaware that her mic was still hot. I told you that voicemail would surface. You never delete anything, Kellen. He shot her a look sharp enough to cut glass. I watched it all unfold live. Still standing on the courthouse steps, still wrapped in that old coat, still cold. But something had shifted. I didn't leak the clip. Someone else had access. Someone had finally had enough. My phone rang a few minutes later. Maya, the reporter I'd spoken to earlier. Did you leak this? She asked. I smiled. Nope. Well, it's everywhere. Good. Can I quote you? You can quote this, I said. I didn't have to leak it. The truth runs on its own legs. That line ended up everywhere, on headlines, memes, t-shirts, but it wasn't about the publicity. Community groups started tagging me in their posts, advocacy pages, mental health forums, elder care awareness sites. One message said, "You gave voice to what we all lived." Another, "Thank you for proving the silence wasn't our fault." Meanwhile, back at the motel, Delora watched the press conference from the edge of the bed. She didn't say much, just stared. When the audio played, I watched her flinch, not like she was surprised, but like she was remembering every time she convinced herself it hadn't happened. He really said that, she whispered. I always thought I was imagining it. I sat beside her. She didn't look at me. I didn't force the moment. She reached for my hand. That was enough. Later that night, while I typed out a timeline for Maya's follow-up article, my phone buzzed with a new number. I answered. You think this is over? The voice growled, masked, but not anonymous to me. You're next. I didn't flinch. I didn't record it. I didn't bother tracing the number. Instead, I sent a single message in return. Good. Then I know you're watching. Because this time, they weren't just watching me, they were watching the consequences. The lock clicked under my hand, and for the first time in years, I opened the front door to my childhood home without hesitation, without apology, and, most importantly, without asking. I didn't knock. I didn't pause. I stepped into the space like it belonged to me, because legally, for the time being, it did. Delora wasn't with me this time. She stayed at the motel, tucked under blankets with Avery beside her, drawing quietly, crayons scattered across the bed. I had handed the legal documents to the court that morning. Now it was time to deliver them, personally. The house was too quiet. Mid-morning light filtered through the half-drawn curtains, casting long lines across the living room carpet. The smell of citrus cleaner clung to the air, like someone had tried to scrub away the guilt. I stood just inside, letting the door shut behind me with a heavy thud that seemed to ripple through the walls. Kellen appeared from the hallway, already agitated. You let yourself in? He snapped. I didn't flinch. I didn't come to win. I came to end it. He stared at me, jaw clenched, disbelief battling rage behind his eyes. You think you've got leverage? This little sideshow you're putting on? It's not going to hold up. You've embarrassed this family enough. This isn't about embarrassment, I said, stepping forward. This is about accountability. Something you've dodged your entire life. He moved toward me, slower this time, but every step radiated hostility. You always played the victim, Greta. Ever since we were kids, you never could handle not being the favorite. That word triggered something deep, something dusty I hadn't touched in years. I wasn't the favorite because I didn't lie for you, I said. I didn't shove girls on the playground and expect mom to clean it up. I didn't push my little sister down the stairs and pretend it was an accident. His nostrils flared. That's what this is about. You're still stuck on something that happened when we were, what, 9? No, I said, louder now. I'm stuck on the fact that you never once took responsibility. Not then. Not now. You've turned Mom into a puppet, Riva into your handler, and this house into a lie. Riva stepped in from the kitchen, holding her phone. Is this a performance, Greta? Because if it is, you might want to bring a camera crew next time. No need, I replied. I brought something better. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope. This, I said, holding it out, is a formal revocation of your power of attorney. And this, I tapped the second document, is a motion for permanent guardianship. Court dates set for next Thursday, and I filed for a protective order. You are not to contact or approach Delora again. Kellen scoffed. Who do you think you are? I think I'm the person you should have stopped underestimating 10 years ago. A small sound caught all of our attention. Soft footsteps on the stairs. Avery. She stood halfway down the staircase, clutching a sheet of paper, a drawing. Her eyes met mine, then drifted to her parents. I want to live with Aunt Greta, she said quietly. The room froze. Riva's smile faltered. Honey, let's not. I don't want to stay here anymore, Avery said, her voice steady. I'm tired. Riva moved toward her, reaching. You don't mean that. Avery backed up a step. Yes, I do. I was stunned, but I didn't interrupt. I let the moment live. Kellen's voice turned sharp. This is manipulation. No, I said. This is clarity. He stepped toward me, finger pointed. You're going to regret this. You're turning her against her own father. She's turning toward safety, I replied. You don't get to control the narrative anymore. His composure cracked. You ungrateful little... I raised my voice, just enough. You can scream, or you can leave. At that moment, 2 officers entered through the front door, quiet, professional. They had the order I filed earlier. One officer approached Kellen. Mr. Vaughn, we're going to need you to come with us for a temporary separation period. You're not under arrest, but you are in violation of a protective order if you stay here. You've got to be kidding me, Kellen muttered. Riva began protesting, trying to argue, but neither officer acknowledged her beyond a polite, "Ma'am, step back." Kellen didn't fight. He didn't scream. He let himself be walked out, his face burning with rage, but no place to put it. Riva stood in the center of the room, looking suddenly very small. I hope you're happy, she spat. I'm not, I said. But I'm not ashamed either. She didn't answer. Later that afternoon, after everything settled, I walked through the living room. The quiet felt different now, less like avoidance, more like recovery. That's when I saw Delora. She came down the stairs slowly, one hand on the railing. She wore a sweater I hadn't seen in years, one of Dad's old ones. In her other hand, she held a photo frame. She didn't say a word. She placed the photo on the mantel. It was the old family photo, the one from Easter Sunday, the one they'd cropped me out of. This one wasn't cropped. My face was there. The silence between us wasn't cold. It was honest. And for the first time in my life, it didn't hurt. It was a Thursday morning when I came back to the house. Not the old one. The Vaughn family house was now just a line in a case file. But the quiet, single-story rental tucked behind an elementary school and a string of small, wind-worn shops. The snow from last week had mostly melted, leaving behind patches of brown grass and muddy sidewalks. I hadn't expected anything when I walked in. I wasn't looking for anything either. But it was there. A single envelope, plain and folded in half, sitting on the kitchen table. No name on the front, no address, just my mother's handwriting, the kind I hadn't seen in years, slanted, looping, too neat to be spontaneous. I sat down before opening it. I didn't want a grand apology. I didn't even know if I could handle one. I unfolded the paper slowly, as if it might disintegrate from age, even though it had clearly only been written that morning. There's no fixing what I ruined, the letter read. But you showed up. You didn't let me freeze twice. That's more than I deserve. That was it. No, I'm sorry. No signature. But somehow, it was enough. I stared at the letter for a long time, then folded it back along the crease and slid it inside a paperback I'd never finished. The book was about women who disappear, physically, emotionally, from photos, from memories, from history. I'd started it on a flight to Denver 3 years ago and abandoned it halfway through. Now, it seemed like the right place to leave her words. Not forgotten, just filed. The days moved differently after that. Without the press calls and court hearings, the world around me slowed to a pace I hadn't realized I missed. I still worked remotely, consulting for elder care programs, helping nonprofits write policies that might actually protect someone next time. But most days, I spent the mornings at the window with coffee, watching the school buses go by. Some days I wrote, but mostly, I read. I answered emails from people I'd never met. "I saw your story," they'd begin. "I was her once." Some wrote from hospital beds, others from assisted living homes. A few were daughters like me. Some were sons who had watched their mothers shrink under the weight of sons like Kellen. I didn't answer them all, but I read every one. Delora changed too. Not dramatically, not in any movie montage sort of way, but in small, consistent shifts. She started taking her medication regularly. She asked fewer questions about things that weren't happening. She stopped bringing up Kellen. We didn't talk about him, not out of avoidance, but because we didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't tense anymore. It was respectful, like both of us were learning how to breathe in the same space without choking. Dinner was simple most nights: pasta, soup, the occasional frozen casserole I heated too long or too little. Avery usually drew at the table, her crayons bleeding color into the corners of napkins. Delora would watch her sometimes with a look that said both regret and relief. She'd never say it, but I could see it. She was trying. Riva vanished from public view. After the press conference debacle and the leaked audio, her real estate firm let her go. Her name faded from the community events she once organized. The social media accounts went quiet. Kellen didn't face charges, not officially. The burden of proof in elder abuse cases was always high, but he lost his job. His clients pulled out. His office door, once etched with gold letters, now belonged to someone else. I heard through an old classmate that he'd left town, moved somewhere warmer, Florida maybe. It didn't matter. Consequences wear many faces. Not all of them look like handcuffs. A week into March, the snow returned, a light dusting at first, then heavier overnight. I woke up early on Saturday, pulled on boots, and stepped into the backyard with Avery. She was still in her pajama pants, jacket zipped up, gloves on backwards. We knelt in the garden together, what used to be a patch of weeds and broken branches. I handed her a handful of daffodil bulbs. "They look dead," she said, poking one with her mitten. "They're not," I told her. "They just need time." "And the right place to come back." She dug a shallow hole, placed the bulb in like it was something sacred. "Will they come back?" she asked. "If we care for them, yes, even the frozen ones." She nodded and covered the bulb gently, patting the soil like a blanket. We finished planting 3 rows. The sky was soft above us, low clouds moving slow, like they were tired too. Back inside, Delora was standing by the window, mug in hand. She didn't say anything, just watched us. Later that night, as Avery slept and the house settled, I sat on the couch, the letter still tucked inside that unfinished book on the shelf behind me. I thought about everything that had been taken, the years, the warmth, the names erased and replaced, but I also thought about what we'd planted. Some families, I whispered to no one in particular, are built on names, some are built on healing. I didn't get a perfect ending, but I got peace, and that's enough. And this time, when the snow came, it didn't hurt, it softened. Sometimes the hardest truths we face are the ones buried inside our own family. Greta didn't set out to punish, she set out to protect. And in doing so, she uncovered a deeper truth. Not all blood is love, and not all silence is peace. Have you ever had to stand up to someone you once trusted completely? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real, powerful stories that dig deep and speak truth.